walking down the street, you want to have a drink with a friend, and you pass, 4 cafes without even slowing down, and then one is the one. And you search for something, and you flip through websites on Google, and you just scroll by because somehow, and then one says, "Oh, that's for me." If I landed on a website and it said something like, "We're specialized in services for independent consultants that are 60, that have a white beard, that live in Switzerland with a cat," I would think, "Ooh, I'm not sure what their offer is yet, but I feel that they recognize me. That I recognize myself in what they do."
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with John Elbing. He is a business storytelling consultant and the creator of the Story Building Method, a framework that helps companies understand their customers and turn that insight into a clear, compelling story. He's worked with startups, scale-ups, and established teams across Europe to align their message, sharpen their positioning, and make sure their story actually lands in the market. He recently published Story Building, a book that distills the method into practical tools anyone can use to communicate with more clarity and purpose. Congrats on helping companies understand their customers, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Hi, Karl. Thank you for having me. Greetings from Switzerland.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because there seems to be a big disconnect between the way most companies are marketing themselves and trying to tell their stories and the way that actually works. And so I think a lot of the disconnect is that companies don't really understand their audiences in a way that is necessary to successfully connect with them. So tell me more about your framework and how you recommend companies reframe the way they tell their story when it comes to their brand.
So the first thing, I called it story building because I find that storytelling has become such a buzzword that everyone talks about storytelling that you don't really know. Often it's tips and tricks on how to stand on stage or how to start with a hook or whatever kind of thing. It's sort of like, making your story a little bit cuter. And what I try to do is to build a story with, frameworks based on your customer information. And then once you have this structure of a story, then you can turn it into a website or a pitch deck or whatever it is. But it's about that structure. And I find that a lot of companies, they talk about what they do because that's what they do all day. So if you say, "What do you do?" They say, "We do this, 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 and look how wonderful it is." And what I found that's very powerful is to tell your customer's story. It's you're someone that has an aspiration, has a challenge, and we can help you be successful. And look how your life will be better. But it's about your customer, and you're just there. You're not the hero of the story. I didn't invent that, but you're there to help them. And so I looked into, what you go through in what a customer or what all of us go through when they encounter a brand, and how you can build a story to naturally bring them along that path.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that when people are buying something, they're looking for it to have a transformational effect on their lives. They're looking to change something about themselves, and that having a story that is all about the company and the thing they're making doesn't allow for customers to go through that sort of transformational arc in the story, because they're often, if you position your company as the hero with this tool or whatever, then you're saving people, and they're basically makes them the victim of the story, and the victim doesn't really go through any character development or change, and people don't like to be seen as the victim. So it like the message is not nearly as compelling as reframing it to make your customers the ones who are going through this transformational journey with your help, and it really is much more emotionally compelling than what so many companies fall into the trap of doing, which is making themselves the subject because that's where their perspective is.
Sometimes it even comes out in just the vocabulary. So, when companies talk about the user, I mean, I don't know who thinks of themselves as a user. They're a company, they're a person, they're doing things, and they've been put in this little box of the user of the solution, and that doesn't seem very, it doesn't touch my soul when I'm considered like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of the dehumanizing or kind of sterilizing language in business world that it sucks a lot of the emotion or the humanity out of the process, and I think it does hurt the business in the long run because there's the relationships between the people that are engaging with the company and using the tools aren't kind of being met where they're coming from their perspective by the company, because they are seen as like users or all like kind of the data or the metrics and stuff and it's not as fulfilling an experience or transformational an experience that it could be if the company can reframe the way it approaches those relationships. So what's like an example you've seen of someone who's applied this to their business, and what was the results?
So first, just to give a little bit more better idea.
Sure.
I find that when you encounter a brand, you go through 3 steps that I've called recognition, perception, and projection. And I find a lot of companies skip some of those steps. And so I feel, when you first encounter a brand, do I recognize myself in the brand? Is that for me? Walking down the street, you want to have a drink with a friend, and you pass, 4 cafes without even slowing down, and then one is the one. And you search for something, and you flip through websites on Google, and you just scroll by because somehow, and then one says, "Oh, that's for me." If I landed on a website and it said something like, "We're specialized in services for independent consultants that are 60, that have a white beard, that live in Switzerland with a cat," I would think, "Ooh, I'm not sure what their offer is yet, but I feel that they recognize me. That I recognize myself in what they do." And often I find companies say, "Hey, we do this," and then it's up to you to figure out, is it for big companies, small companies, individual, who's it for, and things. And that step where people strongly recognize themselves as your target, your mission, means the right people continue to read or continue to listen. But then the ones that aren't your clients also will skip. So you have a better quality, in that top of your funnel somehow, you're talking to the right people because they've recognized themselves in what you do. And then of course you have to talk about what you do, and we'll skip over that part. I mean, people sort of know that, even there's a lot of things to add. But then at the end, so I think I should use a CRM, a customer relationship management system, because I need to grow my business, and I found the one that's for independent consultants, and it's great because it has AI this and automate that and all that. And then I start doubting. So I'm going to have to include my Excel spreadsheets, find stuff in my emails, use the new system at the same time, and all these doubts. I'll end up saying, "I'm going to have to do this, but I'll come back next week," and then I don't. And so if you can help them project, sort of pre-live, it's going to be easy to set up, easy to learn, easy to use. It's going to save you time. We're going to be there if you need us. We're going to all these things, and you remove all these obstacles. People are one step further somehow down this same funnel. So you have better people at the beginning, and then you brought them one step. They're already living. They see how their life will be better. They close their eyes and they see that. And again, often they say, "Hey, look at all the great things," and then you leave them hanging. So if you can build the story where you go through those steps, the customer will naturally go through the steps.
Yeah, and it's that getting them to see the results that the transformation that they're getting from going through all those steps that make it worth doing. Because if you expect them to do all the mental gymnastics to envision the results for themselves instead of laying it out nicely for them, then it's with the kind of people's behavioral patterns and wanting to get things quickly and easily. They're not likely to put as much of the effort in to actually make those steps on their own without you laying it out for them. And so it really makes it, and when they're trying to compare multiple options, because everyone's checking things out before they even talk to you, if they're going to sign up for some tool, especially if it's a business to business level thing, they're going to be shopping around and looking at stuff online. If your messaging paints that beautiful picture like you just described, and your opponent and your competition is all just like, look at all these features, look at how awesome we are, then you become the no-brainer because your messaging is standing out and helping them feel the way they want to feel quicker, because you're laying out, here's what the transformation is going to look like. And that is a huge differentiator in their minds. Even if they can't necessarily articulate why it's feels different, they're going to know that it's likely to be a better fit for them because they're seeing the results they want, not just, oh, look at the feature dump we're going to get from competitor B versus what you're offering. So there's that huge contrast to consider as well.
Yeah, and in what you said, I think there are two things. One is this idea of emotion and making them feel, and often it's very, very clean, and it's just about the features. Here, you want them to get involved. And the other is this differentiation. There's so much out there. Whatever you're doing, someone else is doing it too, and you can have the greatest story, but if it's the same story as everyone else, you won't stand out. I worked with the world leader of garden shears, of all things, and they had heavy duty, for professional gardeners. They've been around for 80 years and all this, and then they realized that they had this other market of kind of gentleman gardeners, the people that love to have these great qualitatively tools. People would tattoo the brand on their body the same as Harley Davidson, and these are gardening tools.
Wow.
And so they realized, so they started making these tools with leather handles and golden blades and kind of an elite, kind of less rugged thing. But the story was the same, Swiss quality, this repairable, and this and that, and all these things. So we worked on creating two different stories, so that the professional would recognize themselves for the kind of professional tool, and then the more amateur gardener would, because somehow both tools had the same qualities and benefits, but to have those two different audiences recognize themselves separately, that even the resellers had a different story to tell to different people that would resonate better. And then redid their whole communication and separated those ranges, and that made quite a difference.
Yeah, first of all, someone getting a tattoo of Garden Shear brand on themselves that is awesome. I've never heard anyone getting that sort of dedication to garden shears. Those sounds like awesome shears. But also, yeah, the importance of having it's the same product but different story for different audiences really makes that big of a difference. And it shows just how the product is linked to the identity the person has, for he's like the gentleman gardener versus the professional. And even though they're using the tools the same way, or the same purpose, it's about the way the person views themselves and their identity, and how it relates to the tool, that is the real value there, not just the craftsmanship and the physical features of the tool. And so I think I love that story. And if you have any actual pictures of people with actual shear tattoos, I'd love to, because that's hilarious.
I'll have to look at that. The other thing is that this company once you take the standpoint of your customer, and suddenly they're talking, they're really taking, kind of persona of this gentleman, this gardener, gentlewoman gardener. They started doing the gloves and the accessories, and they started going into the kitchen with kitchen shears and things, because suddenly they opened up this universe of this distant persona, and they after 80 years of being professional, these professional tools, they opened up a whole new markets by taking really their customer standpoint.
Yeah, and I can see. I was about to ask about that. Understanding why people were buying it and how they related the product to themselves, open new opportunities for additional upsells and additional add-ons, and expanding on that persona, not because it's necessarily there was an innovative new product or like something that was never been done before, but it was because you recognized in the the buyers, the people, how to expand upon their persona and find and make things that you knew would resonate in a similar way. And that makes for all the companies that go through like product development issues and then try and launch something to crickets and wonder why no one cares about the things that supposedly they're super excited about. It's like, well, because you didn't talk to the people you thought would be buying this thing. You didn't understand who they really are and why they really would care about this. You came at it from your perspective. And so I think it's a perfect example of how understanding your audience first and building your story based on them allows you to not only tweak an existing product's marketing to a new audience, but then also launch new ones with a lot more confidence and a lot more success, because you know that the people you're marketing it to actually are going to care about it and are going to buy this thing, because you understand what really drives them to buy. And it's not because of, again, the feature dump, but it's because it's aligns with their persona. When they look at it, they go, oh yeah, that's something that I want, because that is an extension of me. So when you're working with a company who's doing it the kind of the standard way of where they're focusing on themselves, what's the first step you recommend they take to make this reframe off on the right foot?
So, my company's name is Standpoint, because I really believe that taking the other person's standpoint, your customer's standpoint, and somehow this also works. I've worked with NGOs and nonprofits, or if you want to convince your spouse to go to the mountains instead of the beach, somehow the story could be similar. So I do think one of the first things is to sort of step back and look at your website, your marketing material, and say, does my ideal client feel that, ooh, wow, that's for me? Or, I saw this company that's been around again for decades, for 60 years, and they help small businesses with all the kind of stuff, printers and photocopiers and the Wi-Fi and the screens in the conference room, kind of, they take care of all this kind of stuff. But you go on their website and they say, we do print, we do IT, we do maintenance. And what does IT mean today? Are they doing games on iPhones? So it was really like they had 5 departments. So they put the 5 departments out there saying, this is what we do. And is it for big companies, small companies? What's the benefit? And the story writes itself, as a small business owner, you want to spend all your time with your customers. You don't want to waste time with your infrastructure, and we can take care of all that. And then you can, but no, it was just a catalog of what they do. And a catalog, it was really hard to really understand what they do and why there would be a benefit.
Yeah, I think it's what's baffling is this is not like a new concept. The whole the storytelling and understanding your audience and this reframe is not brand new, but it seems like it's easy to see it when other people's stuff. When people try and look at their own thing, I think there's that bias, or where they connect the dots and stuff in ways they don't realize that how they're making the same mistake as so many other people have. And it's amazing when you can actually see the transformation and the results when the narrative is flipped that way. So thank you so much for connecting with me today, John. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection Podcast, please leave a review, and subscribe. If you'd like to connect with myself or John, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.